Before we move on, I would like to make a very big and important refactor, and it's going to give us a really great opportunity to learn some stuff. Okay, I'll head over to my web.php, and you're going to notice that in most applications that you would build, your route file is always going to be very crowded, and you don't want that, because in future you want your route file to be clean so you can understand, and that's kind of the main focus in this series. We want every single file that we're dealing with to be as clean and understandable as possible. So Laravel provides us obviously with the possibility of creating our own route file. Okay, so we have web.php, and this is for routes that are in the web middleware group, and we also have api.php, and this is for routes that are in the API middleware group. I'll show you what I mean. In our kernel.php, we have two middleware groups. Yes, we have the web and we have the API, and the web registers middleware that it uses, like the cookies, the session, the verified CSRF token, share errors from session, and all that. Now the API simply registers middleware that it uses, like the bindings, throttle. And now, since we have an administrator group like we see in our web.php, we can have our own custom middleware group, and every single route that concerns administrators would go there, and we would have really clean route files. I'll show you how to do this. To create a custom middleware group, all we need to do is append to this array. So we can create an admin middleware group, and like we said, in the middleware group, you just need to put in the middleware that are going to run for that particular group of routes. In this case, I want all the middleware in this web to run, because our user is accessing the application using the web, and therefore I'll simply say web here, and it's going to register all the middleware in this web group. And also I want a custom middleware that we created together, which is the admin middleware, to run. Therefore I will cut this out and I'll move it to my custom middleware group. Okay, so this is for specific routes where we can reference the route name, the group name, the middleware name, and actually use them on one route or many routes. Meanwhile, this is a completely grouped set of routes, okay, just like we're seeing here. Now, how do we use this group of routes? If we run everything now, it's still gonna work perfectly, because Laravel automatically understands if we're referencing a group right here or a specific middleware, okay? But what we want to do is remove the need for this prefix and this, and automatically put everything in an admin.php file. So let's create that file, admin.php, and we can actually just move these files, these routes, like these two, and place them in that admin.php file, and then we can clean up our routes file. But obviously this is gonna break. Yeah, we need to tell Laravel about the admin.php, and we need to register those routes. How do we do this? Let's head over to our route service provider and see how Laravel does this for us. First of all, Laravel actually registers the web and API in the route service provider. So for example, it calls the map API routes and map web routes methods right here. And if you check out the map web routes method, it wraps all of the routes in the web.php in a route group, right? So first of all, it calls the middleware method, and it's going to automatically come and pick up the middleware web right here. So all of the routes in the web.php are wrapped in this middleware web group, and then it calls the namespace method to set the namespace for controllers that we want to use with this group, and by default it's in the controllers directory, just like we've been using, and then it wraps them in a group from the web.php file. Right now, for the API routes, it prefixes every single route there with an API string, and then it uses the middleware API group, just like in our kernel.php, this one, and then it sets the namespace to the same namespace, and then sets the path to api.php. okay, so we can actually create our own. So we are going to call our own this map admin routes, and then we're going to create that method. And in this method, what we would do is we'll call our route middleware method, and we'll tell it that the middleware group for this set of routes is the admin group like we created. And then we'll tell it that, okay, we want every route for the administrators to be prefixed with admin. And then we also want to use a particular namespace, this namespace. And finally, we want to group all of the routes together. So we'll say base path, and we'll get them from routes/admin.php, just like we created. Okay, so everything should work as expected because we've registered all of the routes in admin.php with Laravel using this method. So we prefix all of them with admin, just like we've been doing. We protect all of them with the admin middleware, and all of them are still in the controllers directory. So if we head over back to our application, give this page a refresh, we still have that. We can visit our series, we can create series. All of those routes are still registered. Cool, right? So now what I want to show you is, what if we actually wanted to place all of this in an admin directory, all of the controllers that concern administrators? All we need to do is prefix this with admin, okay? Because this namespace is actually a string that takes in the namespace that we want to save our controllers in. So we have broadcast HTTP controllers, and by default we've been just saving everything in the controllers directory. But now that we have this method, we can actually save them in the admin directory. Okay, that's just gonna make things a little bit clearer. Okay, so if I refresh now, sure enough it fails because it cannot find the series controller in the admin directory. But what we're gonna do is, we're gonna come to our controllers directory, we're gonna create a new directory called admin, and then we're gonna move the series controller into that directory. And since our admin.php also has the lessons controller, we are gonna also move the lessons controller into that directory. But now things are gonna change. When we are extending controller, we need to import the controller, right? So we're simply gonna use broadcast HTTP controllers controller. Okay, so we're referencing this file right here, and every single controller inside should also import the controller. Okay, last thing is to update the namespace. So we have to say we're in the admin namespace, and finally here we also have to reference the admin namespace. Okay, so let's try again. Refresh, and there we are. We're back to successful. So all of those routes have been registered, and we've successfully refactored into our admin directory, which makes things a little bit cleaner and understandable for us. Okay, so one last explanation of what we've been doing. We have a web.php file. We also have API.php that Laravel provides by default for us. And what does Laravel do? In the route service provider, Laravel has methods that registers the routes in these files. So for example, the web routes in the web.php have been namespaced to the controllers directory, and they have also been wrapped with all the middleware in the middleware web group. Okay, this group right here, and we can find this group in our kernel.php. So all of this middleware are applied to all of the routes in the web.php. Now if we also check out the API group, it also wraps all of the middleware in that file, which is the API.php, in middleware from the middleware group called API. It also prefixes all of those routes with API, and then it also places them in a namespace by default, which is controllers. Now we can also create our own custom middleware group by simply appending to this array like we did right here. Apply all of the middleware from the web.php, and also apply our custom administrator middleware that we created to check if the user is an administrator. And finally, we prefixed all of those routes with admin, and then we also wrapped them in that middleware custom that we created, and we reference that file as admin.php. Change the namespace to admin namespace, and that's it. We've customized our system. Every single one of our controllers concerning administrator is in this admin directory, and also I think everything looks cleaner. Okay, so our web.php file is no longer going to be crowded. We have only the essential routes that concern web.php, and if we want to register routes for our administrator, we can do that in the admin.php. Pretty cool, right? Okay, so thank you. See you in the very next lesson.